Welcome to this Java break with Basis. Today we're going to talk about the new Widget Wizard, a software development tool from Basis that will allow you to generate dashboards and widgets without writing a single line of code. Let's look at our agenda for today. We'll do a quick recap of Basis's dashboard and widgets. Then we'll look at the new Widget Wizard. Firstly, we'll have a detailed first look with Brian Hippel, one of the primary authors of the Widget Wizard. And then we'll look at embedding a widget in an app builder app. Nick Decker will take us through that process. And then finally, we'll insert a widget into a Barista developed app. Christine Hawkins will demonstrate that to us. We'll have a look at a couple of screenshots of how add-on software has inherited these new features. And then we'll take your questions. Let's get started. The Basis dashboard. It's information at a glance. It delivers data as it happens. Data is displayed the way you want it. It'll expose patterns, performance, trends, and outliers to allow business owners and executive managers to make better informed business decisions. It's part of the version 14.0 product set, and of course it comes at no additional cost. It's an included free Basis building block utility for generating enhanced value to your business applications. It integrates easily into your existing app, runs in GUI, runs in the browser, in BUI, and it gives you the ability to visualize your BBJ data, your Pro5 data, your visual Pro5 data, and even data from a spreadsheet. And finally, from any third-party data source, as long as you have a JDBC or ODBC driver access to it. And in fact, you could even harvest data from a web service. After running the WYSIWYG wizard, the summary page of the wizard will show you the few lines of code that are necessary for you to invoke that code within your application. You can copy and paste it into your BBJ app. So where do you find the Widget Wizard? From the Eclipse IDE, selecting BBJ, you'll see a new menu item at the bottom, Widget Wizard. Or from the launch doc that's included with the download, as long as you've checked demos, you'll see the option under Development Tools for Widget Wizard. So let's see the Widget Wizard in action. We'll have a look at this in some detail, and I'll hand off to Brian Hippel now to take us through the process.
On the first screen of the Widget Wizard, we're asked to select the desired build item type, which can be either a widget, which creates a single widget, a widget set, which creates a set of widgets, which is two or more widgets, or a widget dashboard, which creates a full-blown dashboard that contains multiple widget sets. For each of the items, there's a corresponding image to show what it might look like if that option is selected. We're going to go ahead and select the widget dashboard. On the next screen, we are asked to select the container for the widget dashboard. This can either be a window, which creates a top-level window containing the widget dashboard, or we can select it as a control, which creates a control that can be embedded into an existing window. On the next screen, we're asked to enter a title and a name for the widget dashboard. I'll go ahead and enter Widget Dashboard Demo. Automatically, a name is generated that will uniquely identify this dashboard. Also, you can see in the preview window, this is a WYSIWYG code generator, showing exactly what it's going to look like in the preview panel. For example, when I typed the title, Widget Dashboard Demo, it displays Widget Dashboard Demo on the widget dashboard. The next step is to create categories for a widget dashboard. A category is simply a logical group of widgets, with each group displayed in a tab in the tab control inside the widget dashboard. I'm going to add two different categories. The first being sales, and again, an automatic name is generated, which it uniquely identifies this category. I'll go ahead and hit add. As you can see, a tab is added, and I'm going to add customers as a second category. And in the preview window, you can see the tabs, and you can navigate between them by selecting the tab. Now that we have categories defined, the next step is to define widgets for each of the categories. First, we must select the widget type. There's a very helpful menu button that displays the different types, which there are 13 of, with an associated icon that gives a visual representation of what the widget may look like. For our first widget, we're going to go ahead and select an XY chart as the type. For the title, we're going to specify item quantity. Again, a unique name is generated for this widget. For the description, we're going to put in displays the quantity of items. and this will display as a tooltip or a short cue when the mouse is hovered over the widget. You simply add it to the widget dashboard by pressing Add. And as you can see, it's visually added to the widget dashboard. Let's now add a second widget to our sales category. This one we're going to select a bar chart type. And this one will be called Sales Total. And for the description, we can say Displays Total Sales. And again, by pressing the Add button, is created and put on. Next, we'll switch over to the Customers category, which can be done by clicking on the associated tab or by dropping down the List button and selecting the Customers category. For this widget type, we're going to select a grid. And since this grid is going to show us contact lists, we're going to go ahead and put contacts here for the title. And for the description, we're going to say Displays Contact List and hit the Add button. When I hover over the widget, it displays the description that we added. The next step is to define data for each one of our widgets. For the item quantity widget, we're going to use SQL, and since it's an XY chart, you can have multiple series, but nicely defaults to series 1. And we have to enter a connect string. In this case, there is a default connect string that we're going to use. Next, we have to enter the query, which we are going to paste in. There's an execute button that shows the resultant data set. Once we are happy with the result set, we simply hit the update button to fill in the widget with the data. Since this is an XY chart, we can add another series by simply selecting series configuration, adding the new series name, let's just call it series 2, and pressing the Add button. Once we select Done, it's automatically selected, and in this case, we can use the same query since it's really just doing a random to get the results. So let's go ahead and do an update, and sure enough, now you see the other points in the XY chart or series. Now it's time to fill in the data for the sales total. So we select the sales total widget. In this case, we're going to use SQL instead of a record set. We're going to use the same connect string, but this time we're going to use a different query. So I'm going to paste in the query and hit the update. As you can see, the sales total bar chart is now properly filled. Now we will switch categories to the customers, and we will select the contacts widgets. And this time, instead of using SQL, we're going to use a record set. For a record set, a file name and template must be provided. For the file name, we will enter the file that contains the data for the widget. For the template field, we'll paste in the template that describes the fields that are in the customer file. Once we have done that, we can select the columns button. And by default, all the fields are selected. You can select all of them, and just select the ones that we want. So in this case, we want customer number, the first name, the last name, and go ahead and put in their phone. And we can test it out by hitting execute, like we did earlier. It shows what it's going to look like. We hit done when we're satisfied, and then hit update, which will fill the contact grid widget with data. The next step generates code for the widget dashboard. We need to enter the source file that will contain the generated source code. We also have the option on the screen to run in GUI after code generation, which may look something like this, or run in GUI after code generation, which would look like this. We'll go ahead and run it in GUI after code generation. So we go ahead and press the next button, and here is our fully working widget dashboard with all the widgets and the categories that we defined. Also, if we go to Customize, we will see our descriptions that we put in for each widget. And if we hover over each widget, we will see descriptions as well. There's a refresh button that will refresh all the data on the widget. Let's go ahead and dismiss this dialog. And it shows the summary screen. It shows us where the source file was created at, which we entered in the screen before. And it also shows us the embedded code that is necessary to run the application that we just created. So let's go look at those. Here's the BBJ source code that was generated by the Widget Wizard. The first thing you'll notice is that the source code is totally Java docked, meaning that there's run statements that use the Java documentation such as @author and @version, that when the BBJ to JavaDoc utility is run against the source code, will automatically create JavaDoc documentation for this class. Next, you'll see use statements, And it incorporates all the use statements so that any of the widgets or dashboard types can be used. Next, there's sample code. It's using object-oriented BBJ code. The sample code runs the widget dashboard, in this case as a control, since that's the option that we selected. Scrolling on down the source code, we'll notice that a class was generated. This is the class that contains the dashboard control, the categories, the widgets that we created, and is used to display the widget. Let's go ahead and run this code in the IDE. As you can see, it's the exact same program that was run from the Widget Wizard. We can also run this code in GUI. This generator program runs as well in GUI as it does in GUI. So how would you run this generated code from your application? Let's go back to the Widget Wizard for a sec. Remember I mentioned there was an edit box that contained the embedded code? Simply copy this code into your application. So let's test that and see if that works. Let's go ahead and copy this code. So here is a small BBJ program that may be representative of your application or your program. Let's go ahead and run this and just see what it does. So it's just a window that has a close button on it. Of course, your application would have much more controls on it. Just using this as an example, I'm simply going to paste the code in from the Widget Wizard right above where I'm adding the close button in this application. Paste it in. What I'm going to do is hit save and run. And sure enough, we have just embedded the widget dashboard control into our application.
Let's take that logical next step and embed some code from the Widget Wizard into an app builder app. To take us through that process, here's Nick Decker.
I have an app builder project for a customer maintenance program, and I'd like to add a pie chart to it that displays the customer's aging balances. I don't need a full dashboard, but I can still use the Widget Wizard to easily create the pie chart for me. After launching the Widget Wizard, I'll select the option to create a single widget. Since I want to embed the chart inside my existing application to provide a seamless user experience, I'll choose the control container style. This means that I can easily add it to my existing application window instead of having it display in a separate top-level window. The next screen prompts me to define the widget, and I'll select a pie chart from the combo box, fill in the widget's name, and select the Add button. The bottom half of the wizard now displays a live preview of my chart. It's empty as I haven't added any data to it yet, but it's a fully operational chart. I can even pop it out of the wizard. The next screen deals with filling the chart with data. Normally, I'd enter the desired SQL connection string and query, but my App Builder project is a special case. App Builder projects are always built off of a resource file, and my resource file already defines a BBJ record set that the app uses and connects to a navigator control. I want my pie chart to be tied into the existing record set like all of the other controls in the application, so I'll just skip this step in the wizard process. Now that my pie chart widget definition is complete, the wizard prompts me to specify a source file. This resultant BBJ program contains a custom class definition for my widget, so that I'll be able to integrate it with my existing application in a couple of lines of code. I'll save it in a program named widget.bbj in the same directory as my App Builder project. I don't need to see a preview of the widget, so I'll continue on to the final screen. At the end of the process, the wizard lists some sample code that I can use to instantiate my new pie chart widget. I'll copy these lines into my App Builder init routine to create the pie chart widget. The use statement allows my current program to be able to find the new custom widget class that the wizard just built. The other line of code instantiates the wizard, but it includes some generalized parameters for the X, Y, width, and height of the control. I've already added a new tab and child window for the customer aging information, so all that I have to do is tweak the AR aging control's parameters to match my target window. By adding the previous two lines of code, I've updated my application to embed the pie chart widget in the Aging tab. The next step is to have it display the correct financial information for the current customer. That means that I'll have to fill it with the data from the current record set row, just like the program does for all of the other fields. I can go one step further and set the chart's title to the current customer's name. Now that my chart is filled with data, I call its refresh method to tell it to update its appearance, causing my changes to take effect. To ensure it's working as expected, I'll build and then execute the project. I can navigate through the record set, and switching to the AR Aging tab shows my pie chart widget. That was pretty easy, but I'd like to change the chart's colors. Since it's showing how far behind my customers are in their payments, I'd like to have their current balances show up as green and the late balances display as darkening shades of red. Widget modifications like these really only need to happen once, so I'll go back to the init routine and add some customized code. The new code sets the background of the chart to a picture of currency. It modifies the pie chart labels format, and it sets the pie slice colors. I'll run it again now to see how it looks with my new changes. After building and running, I'll switch to the Aging tab. The widget displays correctly, but there isn't a pie chart since I don't have any outstanding receivables from this customer. However, that gives me a chance to ensure that the chart's title displays the customer's name and the background has changed to my picture of money. Navigating to the next record causes our code to set the data values for the second customer. And since Betsy Hebink has outstanding balances, I get an informative pie chart. The pie slices get darker red as the past due receivables get older, and the new label format nicely matches my masked input end controls on the left. If I click on the widget's pop-out tool button, I get to see a much larger version of the pie chart widget. This behavior is built into the dashboard widget, so my app gets the functionality for free, and I don't have to write any code to benefit from it. So by taking advantage of the new widget wizard, I was able to embed a useful and functional pie chart widget in my existing program with very little effort.
Thanks, Nick. What about if you're trying to run an app in Barista and you want to embed a widget that you've created with the widget wizard? Well, let me hand off to Christine Hawkins and she'll show us how you can do that with the Examples app in Barista.
Let's put the wizard to work now for us. We will use the wizard to create a widget that we can then embed with a pretty simple copy-paste and just a few additional lines of code into this customers form. This is from the Barista Examples application, customers form. And we'll put a widget on the form that lets us get a graphical depiction of the aged balances. We'll begin by running through the wizard to get our widget created. We'll create a single widget, and for our example, we're going to create a control that contains the widget. This is going to be a pie chart, and we'll call it aged balances, and this will be the aged customer balances. And when we click add, we'll see it show up. What's next? Either SQL or a record set. We're going to let it say SQL. And we're using the add-on software database here. For our query, I'm going to put in something very simple to get us started. When I execute this, I'll get back a single row. In fact, all of our balances are stored in a single record. We're going to use this just as placeholder text because we're actually going to make our widget dynamic so that it updates as we move through our customer records. We'll go ahead and click the update button. We need to come up with a name for our source file. We're going to want to store it in our examples prog folder. So let's stick to the naming convention. We'll put exm in front, and let's call this aged bals. How about aged bals pie? That'll even make more sense. We can have it run in GUI after code generation. Here's the embedded code that we're going to be able to copy paste into our Barista form. So I'm going to go ahead and finish this. And let's return then to our examples app. We'll come back to the code that wizard generated for us here in just a minute. So we want to put this on the customers form. The first thing that I'd like to do is a cosmetic change. I think I'm going to take these sales and purchase and payment date fields and just pull them down under here so that I've got a nice spot here to place the widget on this form. So how do I do that? We're going to close out of the running form. and jump into the Form Manager, and we'll call up our customer form. I'm going to double click there to bring that up. On the Balances tab, we can see that the sales field was moved over and up. So because of the relative positioning, it's very easy to just take those changes out, and that way this control and everything after it is going to fall right in line with the rest of the controls on the tab. I can hit the refresh button, and I can see that, and that leaves me a great spot over here to put my widget. So I'm going to do a build on this form, and then I'm going to bring up the call point editor, and we'll copy paste in some code and explain what we're doing here. So we're going to go into the call points, and the first thing I'm going to do is open up the alias. So we want to do a couple of things. We want to get the widget created in the first place. We want to do that once instead of customer by customer by customer. It'll be more efficient to just create the widget once. And then as we display each customer, we'll refresh the widget. So I'm going to paste some code in here. Now, part of this should look familiar. You can see here that this is the embedded code that the wizard set up for us when we created this pie chart. What's the rest of this about? Let's take just a minute and take a look at it. We are embedding this widget on a form, so we want some control over where it appears on that form, and that's really what all of this is about. What I'm doing is getting a hold of a couple of the controls on the form. The current balance and the last pay date. That's the first field on that tab and the last field on that tab. Getting a hold of the child window. Barista will have a child window on that tab. And once I have those objects, I can then set the height and the width and the X and the Y for my widget relative to those controls and to the width of the form. So rather than hard coding it, I can make sure that the widget always is placed on the form in a position that makes sense relative to the rest of those controls. So I add these few lines of code so that I can replace the hard-coded numbers that are in the sample code with my relative positions. And then the last thing I do, once I've created the aged balances control, is to store it in the BBJ object table, and we do that using the call point setDevObject method. And that way it's easy for me to retrieve and use this custom object later. So that gets our widget created, and we then want to display, after each customer record is displayed, we want to refresh the widget with the aged balances for that particular customer. So let me paste a little more code in here, and let's take a quick moment to discuss this. We are setting up a vector, and we're just adding to the vector the amounts that are in our customer record in the current, over 30, 60, 90, and 120 balance fields. Once I have that vector constructed, here I will get the aged balances control back out of the object table. We stored it there in our after show method. And then we're going to use a new method, we'll take a look at that, called update balances. Provide the amounts vector, and that's going to take care of refreshing the widget on the form for us. So that's all that we need to do in our customer form. I'm going to go ahead and build this. We'll return to it in just a moment to see how it actually runs, but let's go over now and take a look at the generated code that BBJ created for us when we made that widget. All right, you recall we named the program to hold our new object, our widget, EXM aged Bal's pie, and we have that pulled up here. The vast majority of this code is what was generated for us, which is great because we didn't have to do it. We see sample code that we can use, and in fact, we can see the embedded code there that we copy-pasted in, and we changed these hard-coded settings with those that were appropriate for our form. And here's where we construct the widget. Now there's just a couple of lines that I've added, and I'll show you those. One thing that we did was set up a vector for us to use, and in the constructor I've just added a few lines that lay out the labels that we're going to use for our pie charts, the names for our slices. So we'll construct that vector in our constructor. Now we also, when we created the widget in the wizard, remember we provided just some placeholder SQL, and we see that appears here. We're connecting to the add-on software database, and we did a very simple select just to see that we could render our pie chart correctly, and then we fill using that SQL. Well, in our case, since all of our values are coming out of just one record, we're going to fill it a little differently. So I'm going to rem these out. I'm not going to need those. I could just take them out, but I'll rem them out. So the constructor as it is will create the widget object and not really fill it with anything just yet. But then in our after display call point, I said that we had a new method, and I've added that new method here. Very simple. So we have a new method, update balances, that drives through my labels vector and then just does a set dataset value. So for each given label, I take the corresponding amount that we feed into this method from our call point code. For the given customer, we send in a vector of amounts, we update our underlying data set, and then we refresh. That's all there is to it. We copy pasted some code into our call point. We added just a few more lines to our call point, and we added just half a dozen or so lines here. Let's see how this looks now. We'll launch the customer's form here from the menu, and let's flip to the balances tab. We change the position of these sales fields so that we have room. Here's how the widget shows initially. And now, with our new method, as we move to each customer record, it takes the balance fields, puts them in a vector, and sends that vector into our new method that lets us refresh the widget. So as I click through each record, the widget automatically refreshes with the appropriate labels and the appropriate pie slices. And that's all there is to it. The wizard did the heavy lifting for us in terms of getting us a nice custom object built, and we fleshed it out just a little bit for our purposes here. Did some copy pasting, added a little extra code, and we're up and running.
Thanks, Chris. Of course, Chris and her team have also been hard at work at embedding widgets and creating digital dashboards for add-on software. So we'd encourage you to go and have a look at that. And also, if you'd like, just download the demo code and see what they did. A lot of these are generated using stored procedures, sprocs. And if you want to learn and create the same sort of thing for your own application, go ahead. We believe that the best form of flattery is that you're going to copy our code. So go ahead and borrow liberally from our code to enhance your own application. And we also took advantage of the ability to embed widgets within a particular form, in this case, the AR form. Another enhancement you'll see in the latest version of BBJ is that we support high-resolution display quality. That's the ultra-high resolution, or for example in the Apple Speak Retina displays. The little screenshot on the left here shows you what it might have looked like before we enhanced the resolution of the widgets, and the one on the right shows how we accommodate that. And that also required some changes to the language to accommodate this functionality. We've also brought Retina type support to BBJasper reports, whether they're running as a widget or running as simple BBJasper reports outside of the dashboard. Let's summarize what we've covered today. We did a recap of the Basis dashboard and the widgets. We looked very closely at the new widget wizard. We had a detailed first look from Brian, and then we handed off to Nick to show us how we could embed that code we had from the widget wizard into App Builder. We also showed how we could take code that we generated from the widget wizard and embed that into a Barista developed application. Finally, we had a quick look at how add-on software has embraced the digital dashboard, both with a full-fledged dashboard and an embedded widget in a form. Let me conclude by handing you off to Paul Yeomans, who will talk to you about various online resources, including the prior Java breaks about digital dashboards.
Thanks, Nico. Before we take your questions, I want to point you to the available documentation we have for you. Here are the short links, and as always, you can search the Basis site using the keyword dashboards. Previous Java breaks have even more details for your review, and they're available on the Basis YouTube channel. Here is a widget embedded in a character BBJ app. Here is Visual Pro 5 using a URL which fires off a browser containing a widget. Lastly, here is Pro 5 in a terminal emulator with a widget. The Java breaks mentioned earlier take you through the launching of the browser window. And now, let's take your questions.